Hey Booktok, so I just read Play It As It Lays by Joan Didion. The full review is up now on my blog, but I just wanted to give a few quick thoughts on this. Overall, I'd say it's a great read, if a little bit depressing, and it does deal with some heavy topics like abortion and depression, so if that's not your thing, I would maybe stay away, but I really think it reveals some really interesting things about the human condition and life in general. Overall, I highly recommend this book, and I give it a 9 out of 10. Like and follow for more. So I just read If I Had Your Face by Frances Cha. It's her debut novel, which follows 4 women in contemporary Seoul, South Korea. I'll leave their names here so I don't mispronounce anything, but essentially, it is one of the best books I've read this year. Not only did I learn a lot about South Korean culture, but I value my friendships all the more because of this book. Ultimately, it brought home the lesson that the people we bond with in life can really be our salvation. If you haven't read this book, I really recommend it, and if you have, please let me know what you thought in the comments. I'd love to start a conversation. So I just read Verity, and I'm being told this is an unpopular opinion, but I did not care for it. The TikTok I stitched this with goes more into the plot, and frankly, funny enough, it's actually the TikTok that convinced me to buy this book. I will agree that this book can be incredibly disturbing at times and includes some very graphic scenes, but I think the romance subplot really creates a tone problem in this book, and the characters are really underdeveloped. My full review is up now on my blog, but I'm giving this one a 4 out of 10. Hey guys, so I finally finished reading In the Shadow of the Moons by Nansukong. Normally I would post a review on my blog before taking to TikTok with this, but I just really want you guys to read this right now. As I mentioned in my previous video, this book details the life of the author and her experiences growing up in what is essentially a religious cult. I found this book to be incredibly insightful, not only because her experiences in the cult were harrowing, I mean, she was married as essentially a child bride, but also she offers incredible insight into how this experience made her grow and how she imparts new wisdom on her children to live their happiest lives and most successful lives they can. Honestly, after reading the details of her life, I consider her a personal hero.
Let's see what I got in the mail today. Look at that cover design. Wow, do not underestimate children's books. Still surprisingly creepy and occasionally funny after 15 years.
So I saw this display at Barnes & Noble and I had to show you guys. Essentially, you pick the book you want based on the premise on the outside cover. So I selected a murder mystery set in the Victorian era with a lone wolf protagonist. Let's see how this book is. Let's unwrap it right now. I'm so excited. So as you can see, I got Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco. I'm excited for this one. Hey guys, so I just finished Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco, and I wanted to share my thoughts with you. Just going into the plot a little bit, it follows a young woman named Audrey Rose Wadsworth in Victorian England. She is living in the time of Jack the Ripper, and she is very much interested in death. That's not the right way to put it, but her uncle is, I suppose, a coroner. They don't really get into his official job title, and she very much wants to follow in his footsteps. I suppose the trouble is that, she's a woman living in this time, so her options are very limited. Thankfully for her, her uncle is very understanding and kind of allows her to attend his postmortems and even teaches her how to properly dissect specimens and all that, so she's very much learning under him. However, not only is she a woman in this society, she is of noble birth, so it's, I suppose, very much scandalized, in her day that she was involved in stuff like this and essentially learning in the sciences along with her uncle. I suppose it was scandalized because they don't very much get into it in terms of how she's bucking with society. Like, yeah, like occasionally her dad will give her lip and forbid her from going out. Her uncle will say, oh, you're a lady, like you shouldn't be hearing certain things about certain elements of the sciences and other improprieties of life. But like beyond those occasional warnings, she really doesn't have to deal with the consequences much of being a woman in this society and learning these things beyond the occasional slap on the wrist, and then she just goes about what she was originally doing. I really wish they went more into the details of, how she's violating propriety and how serious that is for a woman of her station, especially because, one thing the title didn't do was lie. She eventually, comes to believe that someone in her inner circle is involved in these murders of Jack the Ripper and is terrorizing the women of her community. I will say there is some pretty on-the-nose dialogue. She almost says verbatim multiple times, especially in the early chapters of the book, that she's not like other girls, and at a certain point you're like, okay, I get it, like let's move on. I feel like my gripes are relatively minor though. Overall, especially coming off reading a book like Verity, which was also a murder mystery with a bit of a romance subplot, I will say that I thought Jack the Ripper did it better. Honestly, this book has so many triggers that TikTok would probably ban my page just for talking about it. The full review is up now on my blog, but this book is an honest exploration of trauma in the life of a gay man who is an aspiring playwright and ex-evangelical. So if that sounds interesting to you, I highly recommend this one, and I'm giving it a 10 out of 10. Hey guys, so I just finished The Women of Troy by Pat Barker. I have such mixed feelings on this one, I can't even begin to tell you. The full review is up now on my blog, but I will say that this plot moves pretty slowly. However, a lot of that time is used for character development, and I will say that this book has very rich characters, and perhaps that makes it worth the read, but I almost gave up on it because the plot doesn't really start moving until about halfway through. But if you're a patient reader, I definitely recommend this one. If not, maybe it's not the book for you. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thanks. You guys, I simply have no words. Emily Atami's debut novel, Fault Lines, is one of the funniest, most insightful books I've ever read. It follows a stay-at-home mom / housewife named Mizuki, and true to the title, there are fault lines in her life that she's kind of discovering. She's having a bit of an existential crisis, and kind of wondering for herself, like, would my life have turned out differently if I took one path over another? She loves her children and her husband dearly, honestly, her scenes with them made me laugh out loud, full stop. At one point in her life, she was an aspiring singer, and she kind of gave up on those dreams to settle with her family in Tokyo. Really, this book asks the question of, can you be happy where you're at? Or, when you're unhappy, do you need to seek greener pastures? It's an interesting question to ponder, and I think this book does a really good job coming to its own conclusions. So if you haven't read this one, I highly recommend it, 10 out of 10. You guys, I just finished a really good memoir, and I'm excited about it. Let me just start off by saying, Amy, if you're ever back in New Jersey, or if I'm ever in Oregon, let's meet up for a coffee, because oh my god. Amy Plotnick's memoir follows her journey into polyamory, as at the beginning of this writing, she had recently gotten out of a 10-year-long monogamous relationship. In particular, this book follows her through a series of 82 dates, in which each of the date has its own kind of lesson for her. She's a recovering people pleaser and is learning radical honesty and to be comfortable in her own boundaries. We ultimately see her blossom into a really self-assured person, and it's a wonderful journey to watch. I'd say the book landed for me somewhere like, think a spiritual version of Sex and the City. Like that with a lot more spirituality thrown in. As a fan of that show, I have no problems with that. Amy talks a lot about her journey from being like a people pleaser to a more radically honest version of herself where she's more comfortable setting boundaries. And as a recovering people pleaser myself, I found that message really inspiring, and I don't know, maybe some of you guys will too. And I really appreciated how this journey feels really human. What I mean by that is, she messes up along the way in her journey toward radical honesty. It's not always perfect, and I appreciate that she didn't paint it as, this thing that was easy for her to overcome and easy for her to accomplish. Even far into the book, sometimes she stumbles with her radical honesty, and I thought that was refreshing and relatable. To keep my critique balanced, there was a couple things about the book I didn't necessarily enjoy. I thought some lessons were a little bit repetitive, if I can be truly honest, but I wouldn't say that took away from my overall experience of the book at all, and it still left me with a very positive feeling. Overall, I really enjoyed this one, and I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Have you read it, or do you want to read it? Also, let me know what I should read next. I look forward to your guys' recommendations, too.